Hello class, it's Mr. Mormon. Welcome to video 2 in our unit on cells. Today we're going to be reviewing all of the organelles that you would find in a typical cell and what their functions are. This worksheet accompanies the video. On the front we're going to be coloring and labeling these two diagrams of a plant cell and an animal cell. And on the back, we're going to be writing down the function of each of the cell parts and then comparing it to a part that you would find in a factory. This will help us better understand and remember what the different parts of a cell do. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is color and label our cell drawings. This is a typical plant cell. What you need to do is add color to your drawing on your worksheet and then add labels. You don't have to write down all the functions you see here, just this organelle names. You can pause the video at this point while you are doing your coloring and labeling. Now you're going to color and label the animal cell. Again, you only have to label what's written in red and highlighted in yellow, the names of the organelles. You don't have to write the functions here. The functions you're going to write on the back. Okay, now that you've finished the coloring and labeling, let's get started on the back. The cell is one of the most basic units of life. All living things are made up of cells. There's millions of different types of cells. There are cells that are organisms unto themselves, such as microscopic amoeba and bacterial cells. And there are cells that only function when part of a larger organism, such as the cells that make up your body. The cell is the smallest unit of life in our bodies. In the body, there are brain cells, skin cells, liver cells, stomach cells, and the list goes on. All of these cells have unique functions and features, and all have some recognizable similarities. In this presentation, we will be comparing the cell to a factory so you may better understand its workings. The organism we see up here is a unicellular organism. It's a protist that you might find in pond water. Here we see a typical leaf cell. As we zoom in on the leaf cell, we can see in this cross-section that it's made up of many different cells. As we zoom in further, we can begin to see inside each cell there's many different parts or structures that we would call organelles. The many parts of the cell can be compared to a factory. This will help us better understand how they all work together to keep the cell alive. On the worksheet you are given, we're going to copy the function and factory analogy of each cell part. So let's start with the cell wall. In this plant cell, we see the cell wall around the outside. It's this thick layer around the outer edge of the cell. This is the part you copy down. It surrounds, supports, and protects the cell. In our cell factory, the analogy would be it's like a security wall. The next part is the cell membrane. Now, plant cells have a cell membrane just inside their cell wall. The cell membrane is found in both plant and animal cells. In animal cells, the cell membrane would be the outer layer. Its function, it is a thin, flexible membrane with openings that control what enters and leaves the cell. In our cell factory, the analogy would be it's like a security fence with a gate and a guard, again, controlling what goes in and out of the cell. Next, we have the nucleus. The nucleus is usually found in the center of the cell. All cells except bacteria have a nucleus. The nucleus contains DNA in the chromosomes. There we see the nucleus, that large round structure. Its function is the control center of the cell. In our cell factory, it would be like the main office where all of the decisions are being made and everything is being controlled from. Next, we have chromosomes. Chromosomes are found in the nucleus. Normally, the DNA is in the form of very long, loose strands called chromatin. But when the cell is ready to divide, the chromatin bunches up into tightly coiled rods called chromosomes. Because the DNA gets copied here, you actually end up with two rods, doubled rods, and they often look like X's, like we see here. Now, the function of the chromosomes is they contain the DNA. The factory analogy would be like file cabinets in the main office. All right, next we have DNA. DNA is called the blueprint of life. It contains all of the information on how to build the cell and how each part functions. In multicellular organisms, the DNA in each cell contains the information for each and every other cell in the organism. Traits are passed from generation to generation through DNA. The shape of the DNA molecule is like a twisted ladder. It's called a double helix. Here we see an artist's drawing of the DNA molecule, if you could see each of the atoms that it's made of. More typically, it's drawn looking like this. The guanine, thymine, cytosine, and adenine are called nitrogenous bases. These are like the letters of the DNA alphabet. The code is spelled out in the rungs of the DNA ladder. So the function of DNA, it's the genetic material which contains all of the information for all of the cell's functions. Our factory analogy would be like a blueprint. Here we see in our cell factory the boss leaning against a desk or a file cabinet, and that might be a blueprint he's looking at there. That would be the analogy for DNA. RNA. There are two types of RNA, messenger RNA and transfer RNA. Because DNA is the single giant important copy of all the cell's genetic information, it is too large, and I would say too important, to leave the nucleus. Instead, messenger RNA makes copies of small sections of the DNA and delivers the message to the ribosomes, which are busy making proteins. Transfer RNAs carry amino acids and link them up, forming proteins according to the instructions on the messenger RNA. The function of RNA is messenger RNA makes copies of the information on the DNA and delivers it to the ribosomes, where transfer RNA link up amino acids according to the directions to make a protein. So here we see DNA. The information has to come out into the cytoplasm, and it's going to be copied by messenger RNA. So in our factory analogy, it is like a copier and a messenger. The factory analogy would be like a copier messenger. And here we see the blueprint being brought up to the worker who needs it at the ribosome. That would be the function of RNA. Next, we've got cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the jelly-like goo that fills the cell. All of the organelles float in the cytoplasm. A factory analogy would be like the shop floor, where all the machines are and where all the work is being done. Next, we've got the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum is a complicated system of passageways that leads throughout the cell. It is most abundant around the nucleus. Its function is a system of passageways for transporting materials throughout the cell. Here we see some endoplasmic reticulum here and here. Again, lots of it around the nucleus. In our factory, it would be like hallways, forklifts, and conveyor belts, all designed for moving stuff around, transport. That forklift might represent the endoplasmic reticulum. Ribosomes. Ribosomes are tiny organelles that are found floating in the cytoplasm or attached to the endoplasmic reticulum's wall. That would be then called rough endoplasmic reticulum. Although they are quite small, they have a very important job. They make proteins from amino acids following the DNA's genetic instructions brought to them by the RNA. So here's what you need to write down. Here are some ribosomes. They're the tiny little dots that you see here in the cell. Their function is to make proteins using information from DNA. In our cell factory, they would be like the machines. Next, we have mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. They use food, or like glucose, as fuel and turn it into energy for the cell to use. The process is called cellular respiration. Mitochondria can usually be identified. They look like long, thin sausage shapes with a folded membrane inside. Here we see a couple in this cell. They produce energy for the cell through respiration. In our cell factory, they would be like a generator. And here we see a worker putting fuel into the generator to produce electricity or to produce power. That's what the mitochondria does. Next, we've got vacuoles. Vacuoles are storage sacks for food, water, or wastes. In this plant cell, we have a very large water vacuole here. In our cell factory, there would be storage tanks, containers, or boxes. Here we see a stack of boxes that could represent the vacuoles. Chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are found only in plant cells and certain autotrophic microorganisms. Chloroplasts are full of the green pigment chlorophyll, which turns sunlight energy into food for the plant. The process is called, of course, photosynthesis. In this plant cell here, we see several green chloroplasts. Their function is to turn sunlight energy into food for the plant cell. Again, photosynthesis. It would be like solar panels in our cell factory. Lysosomes. They function to produce enzymes which digest or break down large food molecules, or they can also break down dead cell parts. So they're kind of like a garbage disposal. And our final cell part are the Golgi bodies. Golgi bodies' function is to package and transport items around the cell. These are Golgi bodies here. You'll see that they work closely with the endoplasmic reticulum. They package things up and then they're transported throughout the endoplasmic reticulum to different parts of the cell. They could even be packaged up to leave the cell. The factory analogy would be like boxes on a conveyor belt. Again, things being packaged and moved around the cell. Okay, those are all the cell parts that we need to know for now. If you have any questions, please ask them in class tomorrow.